the Food Bank Tableau user group. Really excited about today's presentation. We have an awesome presenter and a really interesting and valuable topic. So we'll be talking relationships versus joins versus blends with Tableau visionary and expert Felicia Styer. We'll pass it to her in just a moment, but just want to go through our very simple agenda today. I want to give a little information about this group, a couple of announcements, and then, like I said, we'll pass it to Felicia for our keynote. If we haven't met, I'm Caleb, digital marketing and data specialist with Feeding the Gulf Coast in, it says Theodore, Alabama, but it's Mobile, Alabama, be more well known, right on the Gulf Coast. And our co-host is Tammy Jackson. She's data analyst with Golden Harvest Food Bank in Augusta, Georgia. Quick run through about, so this is, of course, the Food Bank Tableau user group. We meet about once a quarter, sometimes more, just to connect and share our knowledge, best practices. Oftentimes, just like today, we'll invite guest speakers. And we also have a Slack community for us to stay connected between meetings, to share ideas, ask questions, talk about our favorite Tableau tips, cool things you've discovered or whatever. That QR code will give you a link to that. So please feel free to join that. And then also make sure you join the official Tableau user group chapter. So that is a separate thing you join outside of the Slack. But if you're in the food bank space, the hunger relief space, please do join the Tableau user group chapter. That way you get emails about our events. If you are interested in presenting a topic, please let me know. We would love to feature you. It doesn't matter your skill level with Tableau. One of the things I hear a lot from our members is that they want to see what other food banks are doing with Tableau, the different use cases. You can also just feel free to present, a problem you're trying to solve. The Slack is a great way to do that. But if you have something maybe a larger scale, we could certainly have that at a TUG meeting. So please reach out. My email is there, or you can message me in Slack. Again, really want to highlight that use case. I've presented before. I'm happy to do it again if anyone is interested in how I use Tableau at Feeding the Gulf Coast. But I really want to get some other folks that are using it for different things as well. Final announcement. This is a new thing that they announced at Tableau Conference just a few weeks ago. There is another Slack you can and should join. You can never join too many Slack communities, I'm just saying. So this is the official Tableau community on Slack. There's thousands of Tableau users and experts from all across the world on there. You can network, connect, share events, find events, all of that stuff. So another QR code there to scan. And again, if you need this information, by all means, reach out or just watch the recording. So with that, we're going to pass it to Felicia to talk relationships, joins, and blends. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so she can share her screen. And take it away.
Thank you so much, Caleb. I'm so excited to be presenting to this group today. My first data job was working with a nonprofit. It was with youth development instead of food banks. But that commitment to service, that nonprofit ethos of wearing a lot of hats, sometimes being a department of one, and doing all sorts of strange things to keep things running. That's something that I experienced very early in my career, and I have tremendous respect for all of you. So thank you all for being here and listening to this. A little bit about me. I'm Felicia Styer. I work with a consulting company, Playfair Data. We provide both training and consulting support. So if you need help on a project or need, some training help, feel free to reach out to me. We're always open to more work. And then you might see me online on Blue Sky, Reddit, Slack, LinkedIn, and other places. And I generally use the handle Grasshopper or my own name. I've got this cute little grasshopper avatar. So if you see me online, you might be familiar with that. So let's start talking about relationships, joins, and blends. This is how you're going to bring together tables or data sources in Tableau. So anytime that you've got two different tables, let's say food scarcity along with deliveries, or maybe distribution centers and customer population, and you want to see those in one space, you're going to be using a relationship join or a blend. All of these tools have different interfaces and behaviors, and understanding the subtle differences between how each of them behave is going to save you a lot of time, so you can choose the right tool first and not have to rebuild your things. First, we have relationships. So these are going to be your default approach. If you've ever heard somebody talk about noodles with data, this might be a relationship, and it's like a smart join. So it's a join that's going to automatically limit your rows to what's relevant to improve performance. It's going to have smart aggregations, so the aggregations are going to be performed within their source tables and then brought forward so you don't have to deduplicate things. It tends to make things run quickly and cleanly, and sometimes it might do things that are a little bit unexpected. It might be a little bit too smart. Next up, we have joins. Joins are going to be the bedrock of data engineering. So a join is going to act the exact same way in SQL, Tableau, Power BI. These are concrete. So if you want to control the structure of your data, you're going to want to use a join. And finally, we have blends. Blends are a little bit of a wild child. They are incredibly flexible, but they're unpredictable. They work like a limited join. So it's like an on-the-fly left join that can never add rows. So you're never going to get more rows by using a blend. You're just going to add columns onto an existing table. Blends also have a completely different interface than joins and relationships. So joins and relationships both take place inside of a data source, and blends work across multiple data sources. So it's very different from the other two. So if you're taking screenshots, this is a good slide to take a screenshot of. It's exactly what we've been talking about before. I'll give you a second, just in case. This is recorded, so we'll go ahead and move on. And here's an analogy. So with relationships, we really want to think about the tables as ingredients. These tables are going to be stored separately. So you have this bank of flour, a bank of eggs, a bank of frosting, and you can combine those in different ways on the fly. So on the fly, Tableau is going to say, oh, you're making a cupcake, or you're making a cake, or a cinnamon roll. Let me put that together for you and give you what you want. So you're really storing them separately, so it's very efficient for storage, and things are aggregated within their source tables. With joins, it's like you have a cake. So everything's baked. You have that final data structure, but then you have to carry a cake around, and it might be very big and unwieldy and kind of hard to move. So you're not always going to have the best performance, but you know exactly what you have. And then blends are a little bit like stacking a croissant on top of a cake. Like it's just, you've got two fully formed data sources and you are mashing them together, and it might work and it might not. So this is my analogy. I hope that helps you. Yeah. And then let's jump into our demo. So I have this pre-prepped workbook where I've created a relationship, a join, and a blend. I'm going to show you how we can configure them and create them, and then I'll walk through some of the differences in how they behave. So we're going to start with a relationship, which again is our default method. So if I go into my data source, this is what a relationship looks like. We have table one. This is our logical layer right now. So this is a logical table. And so we have two logical tables, and they're connected by a noodle, okay? If I want to add a table into this, I can simply drag it into the view, and wherever I drop it, it's just going to tell me where the noodle is. And then I can configure my join condition down here. So I can change what field we're joining on or relating on. I can add more conditions into that relationship, and I can take them away. So let's go ahead and leave it as checkouts and check-ins. This is a library database that I created to kind of show what a circular data model might look like, where we have these two core tables with a lot of information, and they're joined to various fact tables. But we want both core tables to be connected to those fact tables. It's kind of hard to work with a traditional relationship structure. There is a new feature with multiple base tables. So it is possible now. We're not going to talk about multi-fact relationships right now. There's plenty of content on that if you want to learn more later. But essentially, it's a data source with a many-to-many relationship where we have a lot of checkouts tied to a lot of check-ins, a lot of different tables that we can play with. And this is what I'm using to demo to you. Again, this is universal for any two data sources you want to bring together, whether it's, incoming shipments and outgoing distributions, like anything. Okay, this is how it behaves. Right now, we can see that we have a bunch of loan IDs. We got 17 loan IDs, and we are seeing nulls in both the check-ins and checkouts. Watch what happens when I remove these measures. All of a sudden, we just have 6 rows, and it's just because I changed the pills on the marks card. This is happening because of something called contextual joining, okay? It will automatically turn it into an inner join when there are no measures being used. And if I want to see that outer part of the join, I need to bring in a measure. So if I bring in my count from my check-ins table, all of a sudden I get these null checkouts because I'm getting the outer part from my check-ins table. So these check-in records are not included when there are no measures. They're only shown when I bring a measure into the view. So if you're ever working with a relationship and you're like, I know there are nulls here and I can't see any nulls, what you need to do is go in and bring a measure from each table into your marks card, and that's going to reveal the hidden nulls and turn it into a full outer join. Okay, so that's the contextual joining. The other part of this is that we do also have smart aggregations happening. I'm not going to really demo that. There's a lot written about the smart aggregations. They're a little bit more intuitive, but essentially if we had a metric like fines paid for our check-ins, that would be totaled up within the check-ins table and then displayed along with our data. So if we had one check-in tied to multiple checkouts, it would not duplicate that number. We don't need to dedupe using LODs, using relationships, which is such a game changer. Okay, that's relationships 101. I'm going to move on to joins now. So that we have the same table here with joins. Let me show you how we built it. So now joins happen within the physical layer. So we have the logical layer where we had our relationships. Joins are happening beneath it in the physical layer. This is a logical table here. Every logical table has a physical layer when we double click into it, okay? So here in the physical layer, we can create joins and unions. They can be more than one table. So if I bring in books, it will automatically create a new join in the physical layer. It automatically detects what fields might be shared between the tables. And we can have absolute control over the join type, choosing inner or full outer join, and it won't change on the fly with us. So it's always going to be the same, no matter whether there are measures involved or not. I'm going to go ahead and remove book by just dragging it off the view. Let's look at our join condition between check-ins and checkouts. Again, it's automatically detected that we have this loan ID field in both tables and has built it out for us. Let's go into our join table. Again, a join table is going to do exactly what you expect. So I don't have any measures involved, and adding it doesn't change anything. It's very predictable. It's very solid. If you want to pad your data out, or if you want to create like a date scaffold, so you have a record for every day in the calendar, a join is going to do that for you. And finally, we have blends. Blends are our weird, wild child approach. I call blends my tool of last resort. So here I have my checkouts. This is my primary table. We can see that blue check mark on it. And check-ins is secondary. So blue is primary, orange is secondary. And here I have a table with my checkout dates, and I brought in the check-in dates along with it. Now we can see this is a left join to the checkout dates because remember, blends can never add rows. So I can't make a full outer join using a blend. I'm limited to a left join. And the other cool thing with blends is that we can change the rules of what is being blended on the fly. So right now I'm looking at branch and loan. If I turn off loan and I'm just looking at branch ID to branch ID, Each branch has multiple check-ins and checkouts, so it's trying to bring in multiple check-in dates for each of these checkout dates. So it's saying, okay, branch A had a checkout on January 2nd, and then it had a bunch of check-ins for that same branch. Well, it is not able to display those multiple values because it can't create rows. So in place of those additional rows from the multi-value join, where it goes from one value to many values, it's going to show a star. So you get these star errors when it's trying to create rows and it doesn't have that ability. We can fix that by joining on loan ID instead of branch ID, and that's going to show the values because it's restricting which rows are being matched up on the back end. It gets really confusing, so I always like to start building views that use blends using a table, and then I kind of use that table as a source of truth to say, okay, is this still accurate? Does it look good? Is it working? Because I can check how these relationships or how these blend relationships are being configured and replicate that within my visualization. If I want to change what blend relationships are available, you can do that through Data, Edit Blend Relationships. I don't know why they had this term blend relationships and then created something called relationships. So don't think about it as a relationship. It's a blend relationship, like one word. And now here we can see that the relationship between checkouts and check-ins is a custom relationship where I've set up book ID, branch ID, checkout date, loan ID, and patron ID as potential matches between the two data sources. Automatically, it's already detected most of these. It's just that checkout date to check-in date that I added manually. And you can do that pretty easily by just going into this menu. And let's say we wanted to match. I can't do checkout date part. Oh, here we go. Check-in date part to check-in date part. Maybe we want to do quarter to quarter instead for some reason. We can do that and create a blend rule between the two where we match quarter by quarter. And now we've got that new relationship rule available to us. So yeah, they're very, very flexible. They're very great for bringing in things like target or population metrics where you want to add additional context to a detailed data source. They're not really great structurally if you want to regularly work with two tables together. Those are generally better done with a relationship or a join. One other thing to keep in mind, one last point with blends, is that order is very, very important. Whatever field you start building with is going to be the left side of your join or your primary data source. So for example, I started building this view using our branch table, which just has our branch names, branch IDs. And when I go to show the checkout dates along with it, there are a lot of checkout dates for each of those branches, so I get the star error. When I build the exact same view with the exact same fields, starting with the checkouts table, we avoid that star error because the checkouts table is more detailed than our branch table. So be very careful with what you start building with. Generally, you want to start with your more detailed table as your primary data source or the left side of the join, and then bring in the less detailed one to add additional context. Yeah, those star errors are brutal. There's no easy way to swap them. So once you've started building and you realize like, oh no, I needed my other table to be primary, there is no easy swap. You have to completely restart on a fresh sheet. So be really careful when you're blending. Okay, that is the demo. So let's switch back over to the presentation. Okay, now in here we have a bunch of just screenshots from the demo. So just in case you don't want to watch the recording again, we can also distribute a copy of this slide deck, and then you'll have screenshots for later. All right, so just to recap what we've been talking about with our use cases, relationships are going to be the first tool on your tool belt. So when in doubt, use a relationship. They are really, really, really great when you have two different data sources with different levels of detail. So if you have, maybe all of your food distribution and then like a monthly, like your daily food distribution, and then like monthly quota or goal that you're trying to hit, it's really good at doing that because you're not going to be duplicating that monthly quota by daily distributions. It is really great if you don't want to, if you're having a duplication issue where you're like, oh, I need to dedupe all of these numbers because my mini to mini join is duplicating rows. A relationship is going to fix that problem for you. Joins are great for reshaping your data. If you want to add additional rows intentionally, if you're doing a market basket analysis, or if you're really interested in nulls. So if you're counting up maybe how many census tracts don't have food banks in them, or how many counties in your area have no grocery stores, you might be interested in using a join, because when you're working on counting nulls, relationships, the contextual joins kind of get in the way. You have to start using LODs. So joins are going to be easier if you're trying to count what's missing. And then finally, blends are my tool of last resort. So there are going to be some data types like the GA4 connections or published data sources that don't support relationships or joins. Then blends are going to be your only way to work in additional context. They are also a quick and easy way to integrate secondary data for an ad hoc analysis. So I see this a lot with scenario planning, like, okay, what would happen if we were to get, a huge shipment next month? So those kind of on-the-fly analyses where you don't really want to permanently change your data model, but you want to bring in some additional context temporarily. A blend can be a good way to do that for like 1 or 2 views, where you have a pretty good source of truth, or can use a calculator to double check yourself. Just make sure whatever you're using a blend, you're double checking it, because I've been using them for like almost 10 years now. They still surprise me, so be careful. Chris, blends are my only way to join data tables to ad hoc Excel tables. Yes, absolutely. Chris, that is a great case for a blend. Our gotchas, relationships are going to hide your nulls. So if you're looking for a null, don't forget to add a measure onto the details card from each of your source tables. Referencing nulls in calculations gets very complicated. So if you're counting up nulls, use a join. And then smart aggregation is really great until you start referencing measures from multiple tables. So for multiplying something from table A to something from table B, it can start falling apart. There's some really good documentation on it. There are resources to help. But sometimes a join becomes easier at that point. So if you're running into that kind of issue, there's a 3-part series by Bethany Lyons that came out in 2000 or 2001. And that is really, really great for troubleshooting those issues where you start working across tables and things start undeduping. It's an edge case. I've only run into it once or twice. But if you're running into that issue, that series by Bethany Lyons is really where to go. Next, joins. Know that it can blow up your data source, especially if you're looking at a many-to-many join. Know that you can wind up with as many rows as table A times rows in table B. So if you're joining like 10 rows to 10 rows, you may wind up with 100 rows of data, and the performance can be terrible. So, if we look at, 10,000 rows instead, then you're getting into millions of rows really, really quickly. So joins, if it's not one-to-one, joins can blow up and your data can be really slow and really clunky, but it does give you control. And then blends, keep in mind, you can't add rows with blends. You can only add additional columns and context that way. So be really careful choosing what your left or primary data source is going to be. Because they're unintuitive, always QA your work when you're using blends. We've had an issue where one of those little link icons got clicked wrong on a space where we're using a lot of blends. Because it can be different in every single sheet, you have to check every single sheet to QA it, because if one of those buttons switches, there's really no way to tell other than manually checking every sheet. So they can be a little bit of a pain to maintain, but they're really great for on-the-fly analysis when you just want to do something quickly. Okay, some resources to keep learning. There are a few Tableau conference recordings about data models. One of them is mine, which is going to be very, very similar to what you've just watched. There was also a presentation last year. I swear I did not intentionally copy the name, but Florian Banas gave a very similar presentation last year at the 2024 Tableau conference. I haven't watched it, but I've heard it's good. And then there is a series on diverse analytics using Tableau multi-fact relationships. It's going to dive deeper on that new multi-fact feature that allows us to have multiple root tables when you have a more complicated data model that you're trying to represent in a Tableau relationship. So that's going to be Sean Miller, who is another KC local, Thomas Nahn, who is a developer who's been actually building the relationships and how they work, and then Chitali Mahor, who is another Salesforce dev employee. So it's definitely worth watching if you are available. These are all available on Salesforce Plus. The links are in the slides. And then if you like written content, I am a big sucker for written content because I love using Control F. There is a Bringing Tables Together series that I wrote for Playfair Data, and it's going to take you through relationships, the physical layer, blending data, and some different examples of each. And the relationships model especially uses that same data source that we were working with libraries. It kind of walks you through how to structure things as your tables get more complicated, or you might run into a circular join. So if you've ever struggled with like, oh, how do I get this table in here? I want it to connect to multiple upstream tables. This relationships blog will answer that for you. All right, finally, thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Caleb, for having me here. We have plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and feel free to put your questions into the chat.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, we do have a question that just came through. Zayed says, does it matter which measure we drop to the details mark? Should I drop a single measure from each logical table, or a single measure will be enough?
Yep. The exact measure you use does not matter. What matters is what logical table it's coming from. So if you have a measure from each logical table, you should see all of your nulls.
Awesome. Feel free to come off mute or pop in the chat your question. I'll ask one real quick. Just, we talked earlier, but if you could just talk again about specifically relationships. It's a newer feature from Tableau on how to combine data. But I was telling you earlier in some conversations I've had, it gets a bad reputation. And I didn't know if you could talk about why that is, and then maybe, again, highlight the benefits of it, but maybe why it receives kind of a bad rep.
Absolutely. The first time I used relationships, I think, was in 2022. And I was trying to do this analysis for a client where we were looking at the number of counties that didn't have a certain event happen. So I knew that I had joined in the data to like a full list of the counties. I was like pulling it all together, and I looked at my map, and half of the counties were missing. And I was like, I know I brought those in. Where are my null counties? And I really like researched. I spent like, a while searching for what happened to it, learned about contextual joining, brought in my measures. I was like, okay, I found my counties. And then I tried to count how many counties had nulls in them. And because of how contextual joining works, it required like a whole LOD setup. I was like, what is happening here? And eventually I just went and used a join, and it worked beautifully, perfectly the first time. And I was like, why was this so hard? Well, it was happening because it wasn't a good use case for relationships. So that was really a use case that was more suited for a join. And I felt so burnt by it that I didn't come back to use relationships until a project a year later, where a client had set something up with relationships where they had these basically transactions and then customer service notes. So there could have like 4 or 5 service notes per transaction, and the numbers weren't multiplying. And I was like, wait a minute, this is actually really cool. So it's all about cases where you want that deduplication and mixed granularity situations. But having things not work the way you expect and all of your data disappearing and no clear indicator that anything's being filtered is not a good experience to go in without knowing the documentation. So I think they flubbed a little bit of the rollout. I think some of us have been a little bit burnt by it. But once you get used to it, I promise it's a good experience.
That's good. I like to hear that because we have another question from Chris that kind of is something I wanted to ask too. Is I'll go ahead and read it. Is there a general consensus on performance on relationships versus blends versus joins? Joins seem like they would be fastest because they are fixed in the physical layer and therefore not as flexible as blends or relationships for their trade-off.
It's situational. So if you're bouncing back and forth across tables where you have a calculation that's like if condition from table 1, then give total from table B, a join might be faster. But if you're really having your aggregation being done within the individual tables and then brought together and displayed together, then then a relationship is going to be faster. I think blends are never faster. Blends are just bad. But relationships really shine with storage. So let's talk about a many-to-many join where you've got like 3 rows from one data source matching up with like 2 rows from another and then turning into like 6 rows. That's not a big increase when we talk about that, but when we're talking about hundreds of records or thousands or millions, it gets really big really quickly with a join. Relationships, when you have many-to-many rows being matched up, relationships are going to have a lot fewer rows in the storage, which means faster refreshing and faster querying. For most cases, I would say relationships, then joins, then blends. But your mileage may vary. So
Yeah, that's a good point. So my use case, I do a lot of joins. I'm doing it in Tableau Prep and then bringing multiple sources. I have several unions too that I do, and then I'm doing a lot of joins of tables, and I've had to join on multiple levels because of the duplication errors I was receiving. And then once I have that source, I'm having to build several level of detail or LOD expressions inside desktop. I can't say I was really curious about the performance question because I don't know if I redo all of that work using relationships, which I think would be possible with my data sources, if there would be a performance increase. I probably will do all that work because I am just really curious to see. I don't notice a major. It's not like I click a filter or a page and it just is taking minutes to load or anything. I don't think my data is that large to where I'm having that issue, but I am curious if a relationship would be quicker. I think it would be having to write all the LODs would save me a
there are
lot of.
2 sides of the scale there. So one is that, it's always preferable to do pre-processing outside of Tableau. So if you've got like a one-to-one join where you're just, bringing in a location name with a location ID, absolutely do that in prep first. When you start getting into those multi-joins where you have to dedupe, those LODs are expensive on performance. Fixed is one of the slowest functions in Tableau. So if we can avoid having to use an LOD, that's going to save on performance time. And then, on top of that, just the number of rows that are created. So if you look at the number of rows in your source tables and add them up and compare them to the total rows in your output, that should give you a good clue to like whether a relationship can save you time or not. Because if your join is like 10xing your data size, then you probably want to switch to a relationship. But if it's pretty close, then maybe join might be just fine.
I suspect it's maybe not 10x, but it's increasing quite a bit. So cool. That's really, really helpful. Awesome. Any other questions, general comments? If not, we can move on. We just have our swag giveaway, I think, is the last thing. But by all means, feel free to pop a question in or come off mute. I'm going to go ahead and reshare my screen, I think. Yes, more use cases. Again, this is something I've heard a lot from our community, is just people wanting to see, even dashboard design, like how people are designing their dashboards with what data. But after this conversation with Felicia, I think there would be a lot of interest in seeing how people are combining data sources. She mentions several as examples that as food bankers, we have to pull together output information, possibly receiving information. Then you have your goal, your metrics that you have to meet for each county. Then you have food insecurity information for individuals and children, and lots of data to pull together. So it would be really cool to see how folks are doing that. And then Felicia offered to send questions on Slack too. I assume that's the new Tableau community where you are. Awesome. Yeah, so be sure to check that out. We'll send out all those links and stuff for sure. So
Caleb, I have a question, and it's very specific use case, and I think it's really about how I'm combining my data. So I've been trying to use the zip code ZZTC food insecurity data with combining to our partner data, like their addresses, being able to pin our partners over like an area map with the zip codes. And I'm keep finding that if a partner doesn't exist in a zip code, that it kind of just blinks out. And I want to be able to see that gap that we're having. So it sounds like it's just a join issue that I need to join from the food insecurity side, not the partner side, right?
Yeah, I would suggest going into the physical layer and doing a true join for that situation, because you're interested in those zip codes with no partners, or those partners outside of your zip code.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Good question. Anything else? Oh, I should have had this up earlier, but all right. If not, let's go to our swag giveaway. I have the list. Thank you, Tammy. Give me just a moment. This worked really well last time, so hopefully it'll work this time. All right. We're going to do two giveaways. These are people that were present, so thank you all for being here. You just never know. It's so close. Felicia. All right. I will, please reach out to me for this, because Tableau, the tug that you're a member of, I cannot actually see your email. So please contact me. One more. Here we go. Again, please reach out to me. We'll get you that swag. So thank you, everyone, for being here, participating. Thank you, Felicia. This was really, really, really awesome. Very helpful. Like we talked about, this was applicable to a lot of the work that we're doing. So thank you so much. And yeah, I've given you some time back in your day. So join the Slacks, and we'll see you there. Thank you, everyone.